Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So your favorite host, Tim and Tim, are back. What's up, Tim? How you doing this morning?
Not too bad. Can't complain.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
is such a generic, canned response.
nobody listens when I do, so
You could complain, but nobody's going to care. So
nobody
I
can.
get you. I feel you. Um, well, hey, so we closed the deal yesterday. Congratulations, Tim. You crushed it on that one. Yeah, pat, 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 pat. Well, cool. Yeah, we'll have some social media posts up here in the next couple of days for that closing. But acquisitions are fun, but the today's episode is not about acquisitions. It is about refinancing. So, as most of you guys know, Tim and I did our first deal together. What was it, August or September of 2021, something like that?
Something like that.
So we're coming in ownership about 18 months now of that first deal that we had done together. And what are we doing now? We were buying that property with a bridge loan, and we had our value add rehab plan, and now we're at the point in the business plan where we start refinancing our loans. And what a most tumultuous time to decide to do that.
Yeah, what's funny is I think I heard out there in social media world, I think I heard a virtual groan when you said the word bridge.
Mm.
Um 'cause every,
Ooh, bridge
everybody's like,
loan.
oh, bridge loan.
Bridge.
Um, but the truth is, guys, like they have their time, right? They have their
Yep.
place, right? And there's a time and place for every tool in the toolbox. And fortunately, this was one of those. And fortunately, my man over here, Mr. Vitale, helped with the underwriting, and we underwrote. We're pretty close, I think, on like the rate that we're going to lock in at on this refi that we're talking about. Um, so that's a good thing, and it's always good to have that conservativeness built into your underwriting. Um, but yeah, I'm getting a little off track. But as we're going through the refi now on one of the properties where we did put a bridge on it, back in August of 21. And some of you may be going, August of 21, didn't you have like 2 years? Yeah, we did. We have until August, September to refi this thing. But we're ahead of schedule in terms of our rents, where we thought we'd be on um, on the revenue that the property is generating. So while there's this kind of time going on in the markets right now with like, hey, I know what rates are today. I know what I can go get today. I'm okay with it. So let's go get it. Because who the hell knows what rates are going to look like 6 months from now?
That was exactly what I was going to say. That's we've been having these conversations since like October or November of last year of, okay, we're now a year in. Before you know it, we're going to be a year and a half in, and we got 2-year bridge loans. Where are we on the business plan, and when are we going to start the refinance process? And ding, 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 that time is now. And ultimately, because of everything that's going on in the rate markets today, with the collapse of Credit Suisse and SVB, and I know there's a bunch of other ones now that I haven't really been paying attention to. So it's a really interesting time to try to go get good debt and do cash out refinances. So it really has put a hold, not a hold, but really like a constraint on what we're able to pull out of these deals because of what's happening in the market as of like last week. And to Tim's point was, we don't know what the rates are going to do in the next 6 months. I mean, I think the Fed is meeting today, and I think it's a 50-50 chance that they're either going to not raise rates because of what happened last week, or they're going to continue to raise rates and just like, turn on the money printer so it could go.
Yeah, if they raise rates, man, keep an eye on the stock. It could be fun to watch, and not in a good way.
But we
Um,
made the decision to do something with it now because we're like, a bird. What's a bird in the hand is better than a bird in the bush.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
I butcher those things up.
yeah.
Don't call me philosophical.
That's okay. There was a guy that became president who did the same thing with that exact same phrase. So
Did you
you're
just
in good.
relate me to Trump?
No, that was Bush. That was Bush.
Oh, there was Bush. Oh, yeah.
Bush Jr. So you're in good company, right? Like,
Oh, gosh. Oh,
but
um,
no, I wouldn't do the Trump thing to you, man.
uh,
So
but yeah, I mean, dude, we're in the spot right now. We're like, hey, we are ahead of schedule on rents, but the rates have gone up astronomically. So on the underwriting side of things, because we're ahead of rate, I mean, because we're ahead on our rents, but because also the rates had gone up, we actually needed to be ahead on our rents in order to meet our refinance targets. And we did that, right? I mean, the markets that we had bought these properties in, they're crushing it. Like they're like 20-30% higher rents than we thought we were going to be at, but also the rate is also like, 25, 50, 75 bips higher than we thought as well. But because we were able to build in so much buffer there and continue to raise rates, the property management company has done a great job with continually pushing the top line growth on the property. The rates have really put a hold on what we can do in terms of getting money out. So, we had a lot of conversations with our lending brokers, and they're like, yeah, one of the hardest things for me personally, I know Tim has to talk me off a ledge here all the time, is that when we're not returning as much capital as we underwrote in our underwriting, it makes me feel terrible. But
Sure.
then we have conversations with the lending brokers, and they're like, yeah, okay, well, now you have a lower cost basis and your debt service coverage ratio is better, and what you're making up in equity on the back end you're getting in cash flow during the life of the deal. And
Yeah.
it's really taken a lot for me to get over this hump of, I said I was going to return X amount of dollars, but now we're only returning this amount of dollars. But at the end of the day, the return is going to stay the same. I had one of these conversations with one of my investors, shout out to Chelsea. And she really, we kind of went through all of the different options, and we started showing her like what the returns could be based on the term options we're getting right now. And she was like, well, I'm good with it because you said you were going to 2x my money in 5 years, and you're still doing that. And yeah, my money's going to be locked up, but I'm going to be getting a higher cash flow, and there's a little less equity on the back end, but the number still equates to the same thing. And I was like, oh my God, that was it. You're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It's
Yeah.
it's the delivery changes, but the return total stays the same.
Right. And guys, there's a couple of things too, and we'll go into some other things that were kind of like aha moments recently for us.
Yeah.
Um, but one of not a recent aha moment, although it was a reminder, and I sent this to Tim. I was reading something and there was a quote in there about, hey, if in times of turmoil, if you got a lender that's willing to give you money, take it. Right. Like
Mhm.
that was the phrase. And guys, I'm not relating now. Please don't anybody say that I'm calling today like 2008, 9, because it's not. It's still different. It's still different. But one of the things I remember in '08 and '09 is lenders froze up and you couldn't, it was hard to find money. And I remember
Mhm.
sitting there going, damn, if somebody would just give me a different loan and help me get, 2 more years down the road, but it wasn't there. So, that kind of reminded me, and I sent it to Tim and I was like, hey man, I was like, I wish somebody had told me this back then. And it kind of helps you level set, right? Like it's like, hey, listen, somebody's willing to loan you today at 5.5, 5.6, and yeah, you're only returning 80 instead of 100 or whatever it is, but you're in a much better position. You have returned some capital. You're still invested. You're still protecting investor capital, and the cash flow is still going to be there.
Mhm.
So it's like keep things in perspective, right? Like
Mhm.
keep that in perspective, because believe me, there's nothing any of us want more than to hit our returns on the nose or exceed them,
Mhm.
or hit our pro forma on the nose or exceed them. Um, but guys, things change, and so I think that's a good transition into kind of like what we're seeing right now. Um, because like one of the things that we all talk about with underwriting is building in interest rate raises. Don't assume that you can get 4% 5 years from now if you're getting 4% today. Use those rule of thumbs. Um, but one of the other things that we kind of don't talk about is like in times like right now, what lenders are willing to do across markets starts to vary widely.
Oh God,
um,
yeah.
like in Charlotte, I can probably go get a 70, 75, maybe 80% LTV
Mhm.
on a cash out refi. You're not going to get that in some of the secondary and tertiary markets, right? Like
Nope.
couple years ago, you could probably find somebody to give you
Hell,
$80.
a year
Yeah,
ago, you could have gotten 70 to 80% cash out
in
refi
it in smaller markets.
in small markets.
Today, and we're looking at a refi in a good market, right outside of a great market, but we're kind of what we're being told is 63 to 66% is probably our max
Yeah,
LTV at this time,
LTV.
right? So we're exceeding our performa, we're exceeding our revenues. Um, Cap rate that we got on the valuation is actually not too bad, um, but it's the LTV. The
Yep.
LTV is going to keep us from returning everything we thought we were going to return at the refi. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's kind of like that's okay, exactly because of what Vitali said. You know, at the end of the day, over the life of the deal, we're still going to be right on those returns.
Mhm.
Um, you know,
Yeah, the IRR is gonna look a little different, most likely a little lower because you're not returning as much money up front, but the average annual return in your equity multiple is still there, and your cash flow is going up significantly. So, what we would maybe have estimated 6, 7, 8% cash flow, now we're looking at 13, 14, 15% cash flow, and the IRR is gonna go, down a little bit, but the average annual return still stays the same. I think one of the things that I learned from this experience was to have well, now that I have the experience, it's kind of a different thing. But if I were a new investor and I was underwriting deals and I was making predictions of being able to buy something and refinance out, what I would have done differently and what I would tell people to do differently is before you buy in that market, which you should have a very specific market anyways and know all of those things, contact an agency lender or a term lender and ask them what do they classify this market as? Is it a good market? What are the four classifications that you heard, Tim? I know small and very small. What's the other two?
large.
Uh,
I mean,
Large, medium, small, and then there's very
extra,
small.
very small.
And it was shocking to me what these lenders were classifying these different markets at. And shame on me, I should have found that out before I had underwrote it. Thankfully, we were pretty close anyways, and it worked out. But now that I've had this experience and we have these relationships with these term lenders and agency lenders, I'm gonna call them and be like, "Hey, all right, this is the business plan. This is what I'm underwriting to on the exit, or the refinance. What kind of loan to value are you going to be able to give me, today and sometime in the future? Or what has been your historical loan to value that you've given in the past?
There you go.
Because that will help me determine, do I need to be underwriting my deal and saying that I'm going to get a 65, a 50, 60, 65, 70% loan to value on the refi, regardless of what the DSCR is? Because one of the things that I see in a lot of people's underwriting that they don't take into consideration is there are two metrics that restrain how much money you can get out of a deal on a refinance. It's the debt service coverage ratio and the loan to value. You have to meet both in order to get both, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
so, like one of these deals that we're refinancing right now, we're maxed out on loan to value, but our DSCR is going to be like 1.8 or 2. It's
Yeah.
insane. And in my more novice years, I was like, wait a second, my debt service coverage ratio is there. So I should be able to get 75 or 80% loan to value because my debt service coverage ratio will cover it. And that's what the banks are paying attention to. Well, yes, they are paying attention to that, but they're also paying attention to what is the market? And is it a small market, very small market, medium market, large market? What are the max loan to values that will give you in those markets? Is it 65% and it has to meet 1.4 DSCR? I mean, there's so many different things that are there that it would really be the best advice for you to go out and make those connections now. And I hope all of you are, most likely are buying in a single market or within like a 2-hour radius or something where you can have a conversation and say, I only buy properties in these areas. What are those refinance loans looking like today?
Yeah.
And what have they looked like over the last 5 years?
Yeah. And guys, like, so Tim's talking about something that makes this next piece, in my opinion, even more critical. You know, if you're like in that scenario where his loan to value is, let's say they're capping him at 65%, but his debt service coverage ratio there is like 1.8. It's like, well, man, if I could find a way to increase that value that they're putting on the property, then I could take even more and still have a good debt service coverage ratio, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what you start to pay more attention to is like, well, how do I do that? Well, you got to get your NOI up, right? So now we start diving into those financials and you're like, what did we potentially book in the wrong place?
Yep.
Right? Like, and that's one of the things I'm going through right now is, sometimes working with, especially if you're working with a third party property manager, even if you have it in house, sometimes those things get lost, right? Like for instance, like payroll. Like you just see payroll, and you don't realize that hey, there may be things in that payroll that could be moved below the line instead of above, and instead of sitting above the line. So you
Hmm.
could, if you move it below the line, you increase that NOI, you can increase your value, right? So now we're really starting to pay even more attention to where we're booking things and making sure things are recorded 100% correct so that we can max that value, and try to return as much as possible to the investors.
Yeah, yeah, because in that scenario, the appraised value is going to be the needle mover in order to get the max loan proceeds, because your debt service coverage ratio is more than covered, right? So what's the other thing that needs to move? It has to be the value of the property has to go up. So then if you can get a higher appraisal and then you're capped out at your 65 or 70% loan to value, but now your DSCR has gone from 1.8 to 1.7, you're still good because the minimum is 1.4, right?
Right.
So you see there's a lot of moving parts here, and I can't emphasize it enough. I mean, this is where I get all nerdy on the numbers. I get super nerdy about this stuff because there are so many different moving parts. It's not something that you can just say a blanket statement. I'm going to get 75% loan to value and this rate and this amortization or this many IO months or whatever. There's so much more to that, like that's affected to it when you're looking at the value of the property, the debt coverage ratios, and your future, future business plan, because the banks want to know that too. So that that's kind of where I fit in this. Like that's where I really like to go into the stuff and kind of look at all the hypotheticals. And maybe I do it a little bit too much on the acquisition side, but hey, so far what we found out that it's paid off. When I start looking at that stuff and I'm like, wait, Tim, you know, when we're buying these properties and you're assuming that we can get 75%, but our debt coverage is a 1.2, and I know that it needs to be a 1.3. I'm like, no, we're not going to get 75%. We're going to get
Yeah.
70%. And that immediately changes, the returns for the investors and what our offer price can be and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And see, I don't like that part. Um, I don't like that at all. So this is where Vitaly comes in really great in this partnership
Numbers
because
nerds.
yeah, because I want him to go look at it, and then I want him to look at me and go, "Here's the shovel, here's the pan, go dig over there for gold." Right? Like
Yeah, right.
that's what I want because I don't want to dive into that. I'm just like he's like, I think we need to go look at maintenance labor to find some additional numbers we can move below the line. Okay, got it. I'll go look at that. Right.
Right, right.
So
It
that's
doesn't seem right. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel right. Okay,
yeah.
I mean, that's usually a good enough hunch to look into something. Is it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Did we really spend that?
Yeah. What did we spend it on? I don't know. Let's find out.
Yeah. And guys, don't take this to mean that we're not like on top of these things because we keep an eye on them. But at the end of the day, there's still tweaking that can always be done, and for the most part. But again, one thing. So don't ever think that this is like a go just cook the books or anything like that. It's like no,
Mm-mm.
go find places that you can realistically and justify the expense being moved somewhere else. If you can justify if it is legit, you need to do it.
Yeah.
Um, but so that's one of the refis. Tim, you're working on one. So I've been leading one. Vitaly's been leading one as well. What's something you've seen there that's really kind of been an aha moment?
So this is I actually was talking to my attorney Nick for the about this refinance because I had never heard of this before, and I don't know if there's more experienced people on this call or not, but something that I learned about is when you have a loan or you're going for a refinance term loan and the bank is interested in giving you that loan, but they're going to package it up on a CMBS loan and sell it later. What they're requiring us to do is set up a Delaware special purpose entity, because when they package up the loans together, they all have to be the same structure. You can't have multiple different states and multiple different structures and all this kind of stuff packaged into one loan that the bank is going to sell off to a third party. It all has to be similar. And what I learned was that they have to do this so that in the case of a default, there's something called a spring member, which this is still something I'm learning about. And I just talked to Nick about this morning. But the spring member is like if you go into default, then the bank already has access to the bank accounts and can take over control because, yeah, they're selling it to a third party, and it's like there's all this other complication that I had never even known existed before because we hadn't been through it, right? So it's one thing to say like we're going through it and we're learning a lot, and none of this is really material information. Well, I guess the refinance stuff that we are just talking about in the underwriting is, but all of these like Delaware statutory trust setups, sorry, not Delaware Statutory Trust, Delaware Special Purpose Entity, SPE, needs to be set up. And it's not like a life changing or a material impact to your business or your plan or anything, but it's all of this additional work that happens on the back end that literally nobody talks about. I have heard a lot of podcasts and I have never heard anybody talk about having to set up a Delaware SPE, changing their bank accounts, deeding this over to one new member, setting up a new operating agreement, and having this spring member for the like. I have never done any of this stuff before, so I thought it was interesting, right? So that's why I'm talking about it, because I literally just learned this last night and this morning, and it's something that I have to consider about how does that change anything for us. And I've been assured that it doesn't, but you don't know until you get through it, because I'm being assured that it doesn't by the attorney. Now let's see if the CPA agrees.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you talk about never hearing that. I mean, I've been doing this a while. So at least the real estate stuff. And Vitaly calls me. He's like, "Dude, we got to set up this Delaware SPE," and I'm like, "Sounds official. Must be legit."
Yeah. Sounds like somebody important knows what they're talking about.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So, and that's a really good that's a really good call out, man. Because there's so many like little moving parts and some little intricacies with this thing that you just I don't I'm not sure that you couldn't do this 30 years and still not learn something new.
Oh, I mean, think about our boy, that we just bought that property from. I'm sure he's learning something new all the time, and he's been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah, yeah, that is for sure. Yeah, it's part of it's going through different markets. Part of it's you know it's just interesting as we go through this, because we all, like you said, with your underwriting, it's like do this, and this is what your underwriting looks like. It's like, oh, but wait, now you're here, and here's the 15 things that go into that you
Yeah.
never consider, right?
Right. And
Um,
and that's why, it's so valuable to have the partnerships, because like I like that stuff. Tim
yeah,
Vest doesn't like that stuff, and that's
not at all.
okay. But as you continue to learn and grow, when you're getting into the industry, you try to make things as simple as possible so that people feel confident that they can go out and do it. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
well, yes, you can do that, right? It's like, think about when you go into school and you get your college degree. You feel like you know everything coming out of college, and then you go your first day on the job and you're like, I don't know anything. You understand the principles and the concepts, but you've never done the application. So then as you're, I like to relate it that way because it makes a lot of sense for people. I'm like, okay, well, when you hire a coach or a mentor, you do a course, or, you're involved in the community, you're learning the principles and the concepts and the theories, hopefully. And then when you actually go to do it, actually doing the work and having to organize all of the things and set it up and do it correctly and on time and meeting all these deadlines, there's 15 other steps that you don't see, but you understand the concept of what needs to happen. That gives you the confidence to say, I know enough to be dangerous. I'm going to go out and do it.
yeah, yeah, and it's where I mean, mentors help reduce that danger a little bit. Obviously, there's no better lesson than experience or mentor than experience. So but like like Vitaly's kind of saying, is like learn the basics and get out there and do it, right, and be ready to kind of adjust as you go. That's a critical piece of it. And here's one thing that we built into our underwriting, which is interesting, because I didn't think I was going to have these kind of conversations when we came up on a refi. We built into our refi, hey, we're going to hold it for 5 years, right? Well, then 2 years in or 18 months in, you go to get the refi, and then you start to see, oh, there's a pretty significant penalty if we don't hold it for 5 years. You start to have that conversation of like, we ready to hold this for 5 years? Like,
Yeah.
and it's not a bad conversation to have, right? It's a level set. It's a reality check. It's like, hey, are we still on the same page, right?
Hmm.
Are we still on the same page? Is this still a market that we want to be in for 5 more years, for 3 more years, 7 more years, whatever it is? Um, it's just always good before you go sign up for that loan that has a 5 year term on it, that hey, if you sell before then, you're going to pay a penalty, because 1% on $10 million can be significant, right?
Yes, it is significant.
So,
The
um,
answer to that question is yes.
yeah. So, just be prepared to have those conversations as you go through. And that's I think that all comes back to what Vitali and I kind of say quite a bit, which is like this whole thing, the underwriting, the asset management, all of it, it's living, breathing, it changes, right? You
Mhm.
you set the roadmap, you operate towards that roadmap, but be ready to pivot, be ready to adjust because it changes all the time, all the time.
Man, if everything went exactly how I thought it was going to go, I think it'd be a little boring.
Nah, I don't know. Sometimes I could deal with some more boring.
So,
I got to
yeah,
be honest.
sometimes I would like some boring in my life.
Oh, you mean we nailed it and I didn't have to have any tough conversations? Ah, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's underwriting when you're acquiring a deal ultimately is speculation at the end of the day, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
why we have our acquisition underwriting, and then we have our in-place underwriting, and then we have our exit underwriting. And the rents go up, or the expenses go up, or go down, or the vacancy goes up or it goes down. Cap rates decompress or compress. I mean, so much happens in the market that's out of our control. Refinance rates going through the roof. No, I mean, I don't want to say nobody saw those coming, but it's a possibility that could happen at any time if you look at historical rates and things like that. So you can't just dip your toe in this and that's it, right? It's in my personal opinion, it's an all or nothing. Like you
Yeah.
need to be all into this industry or not because there's so many moving parts. There's changing things all the time. You have to have access to different resources and mentors and people in your life in order to make it so that you can pivot when necessary. And you don't just build relationships with people overnight. It's something that takes a little bit of time for you to develop those relationships to rely on them so that when you do need to pivot, you know who to call to figure out what to do.
And
Um,
yeah. Sorry. I just wanted to take that back to one thing you said because like I think you hit it on at the beginning of this when you talked about that investor you were talking to,
oh,
right?
yeah.
Like even that guys, like we have mentors that we talk to and stuff like that. But even being able to call an investor and saying, hey, this is kind of where we're tracking right now. What's your feedback? How's that
Yeah.
make you feel? Like,
Yeah.
because Vitaly and I both, we take it very personal ourselves when we've said it's going to go this way and we get there and we're like, man, everything's going this way except this one thing in the market
Hmm.
and it's impacting the business
Everything.
plan today.
Yeah.
And having that investor that you can call to be like, hey, like, blah, 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 blah. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
Do what you got to do. Right.
Yeah.
That kind of
I'm
thing.
still going to make the same amount of money. It's not that you did a bad deal, just circumstances changed and it looks a little different of a picture than you painted. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have a picture when you're done with it.
Yeah. Hey, we had some feedback recently, man, where I think on the majority of our deals, we're still paying pref, and
Yeah.
we had a couple of investors. We made a distribution. We had a couple of investors go, "Thank you, guys! Like it's awesome. You guys are still paying." And I'm just sitting there going, okay, of course we are. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and but it just kind of hit you for a second. You're like, oh, thanks for that feedback. I really appreciate that. And what's interesting is there like this investor sentiment out there right now is like, if I'm getting a return right now, I'm happy.
Hmm.
And Vitaly and I are sitting here going, we have to hit the prep.
Yeah. Yeah, man, there's so many I've gotten the same feedback as well as they're like there's a lot of people that have invested in other deals and they haven't been paying out of pref. And
Yeah,
sometimes it's expected if it's built into the business plan.
sure.
But when it is built into the business plan that you're going to be hitting, a pref in sometime in year 1 or 2 that, you actually pay that money out, right? And with a lot of uncertainty in the market, there's a lot of people that are not paying out prefs and they have variable rate loans. I mean, hell, we have one that completely crushed the cash flow on this place, but also made it so that we're also 13
Yeah,
months ahead of schedule on the refinance, right? So
yeah.
again, pros and cons, and they're still going to get the money because it's accrued. But again, the picture is a little different, but the returns are still going to be the same.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say, here's one little nugget for you, and because I had an investor call me very upset about another deal they were in with a sponsor that I don't know, and they showed me the communication, and the sponsor was basically saying, hey guys, here's the performance of the property, here's the financials. We don't feel like it's a good time to pay a pref just because we need to keep our cash position strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the money was there. They were cash flowing the property at a point that they could pay the pref. But I kind of looked at it and I was like, I can't argue with that sentiment right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're saying your money, the money's here. Your pref
Yeah.
is sitting right here. Here it is in the account. We're just not going to distribute it right now because of the uncertainty over the next 6 months. If 6 months
Yeah.
comes, we'll pay it out.
Yep.
And I'm like, I can't argue with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree with what they're saying there. So, just kind of look at those things, if you will, a little bit. If it's not hitting returns, maybe that's something to be concerned about. But if they're saying we're not paying just to keep our cash position strong, and 6 months from now we'll reconsider, that's
Yeah.
that's something to keep in mind.
Yep. So, all right, guys, this has been a fun episode. We had a lot of viewers today, which is really cool. I think we were up to like 25 people at one point, which is great. So appreciate everyone being here, and we look forward to talking again next week.
Hey, see
Cool.
you guys.
Peace.